560 mobile app. Listen to AM 560 on your smartphone or mobile device when you download the AM 560 mobile app at 560theanswer.com/mobile. From the AM 560 Traffic Center, I'm Jill Urchek.
Now, your official weather forecast from the Air Right Heating and Cooling Weather Center.
Tonight, expect a clear sky with a low of 62. Tomorrow, the sun will gradually be obscured by clouds as wildfire smoke creates a hazy atmosphere. The high will reach 87 degrees. Tomorrow night will be mostly cloudy with a low of 69. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this hour of the Shaun Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and
My next guest is the perfect guest for the perfect day. I've had the pleasure of talking to him a couple of times before, but I so appreciate all that he has done. Best-selling nonfiction author, investigative journalist, filmmaker, known for his work in the medical industry, forensic science, and true crime. He worked with Dr. Peter McCullough and was the primary author of their best-selling book, The Courage to Face COVID-19. And to this day, he is the vice president of the McCullough Foundation and co-authors daily Focal Point newsletter with Dr. McCullough. But more importantly, he is the author of a new book that we must go out and get, Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions. John Leake, how are you, my friend?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Well, I think it's the perfect timing to have you on, because the way that I see this, I'm always reminded of the old-time gangsters after Prohibition. I take the fifth. It was absolutely a confession to me, but I think, therefore, I am. And what we've stumbled on is not just the scandal that is the biggest of the 21st century. Dr. Fauci, the NIH, has been linked to the medical scandals since really the inception of the Rockefeller Foundation, haven't they?
Well, they have. It's funny. I just went back and reread a novel that was published in 1925 by Sinclair Lewis called Aerosmith. And it's about a doctor who finds himself, and this is explicitly referenced in the book, with the Rockefeller Foundation taking over medicine, the Flexner Report. This doctor finds himself kind of in a battle between his conscience and this rise of kind of robber baron takeover of these burgeoning federal health agencies. And you realize there's nothing new under the sun. This is actually a pretty old story. But in the case of Anthony Fauci, what I think is interesting about it, the thing that immediately jumps out at me, by the way, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, cool. Is the documentary evidence is sufficient. Regardless of anything he says or doesn't say in a congressional hearing, the documentary evidence of malfeasance, of fraudulent concealment, and I even think the evidentiary standard rises to mass negligent homicide. Where is Attorney General Todd Blanche? This should be a matter for the Justice Department, a criminal prosecution. And, pleading the fifth is normally something you do to avoid criminal prosecution or incriminating yourself in a criminal prosecution. So You know, we get these congressional hearings. I'm a big fan of Ron Johnson and Senator Rand Paul. I've met both men. I really like them. They're both consummate gentlemen, by the way. But this is really, in my opinion, not that they want it to be that way, but it's kind of a distraction from the documentary evidence.
So, yeah, absolutely. But well, it isn't. I agree, but I also think it's a good footnote. And it's a very interesting thing about Todd Blanche. I'm a big fan. And what happened that's very interesting is that Colburn, a senator, I believe, out of Texas, he refused to meet with Todd Blanche. And he needs that vote to get the job full time. And if you think about what he's done in the short time he's been in charge, I think he's been, really successful when you talk about cartels and Medicare fraudsters and the rest of it. But for him to get that job, he needs the never Trumpers. And it's a very interesting reality we face. And you go back to the Rockefeller Foundation. You go back to the government becoming the Leviathan of corruption that it is. And there's always this duopoly that takes place, right? It's most of the time it's this party, but some of the times it's the other party. What I love about this particular scandal is it is the new supporter of an unlikely guy, a guy who never ran for dog catcher. And it's what we lived through the rise of the Fourth Reich, the repulsives, and the scandals that have occurred in the last 18 years, specifically to Obama. And I don't just mean the $30 trillion that has been used to bail out all the blue areas. But the scandal now, the undeniable reality, there is an entire political party that refuses to look at all of the evidence you have been producing since it began. All of the evidence that we now know is brought out, I plead the fifth and the rest of it. And he also was given a blanket pardon. And that is another admission. So to me, we can't ever seek justice instantaneously. Microwave justice doesn't exist. But what this means for history, and when these kids pick up your books and your work and McCullough's work and all of the things that we went through, this will go down as American Dark Ages. And the scandal will be described for the next 1,000 years if this country should last that long. I really believe that.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I know from studying history that it oftentimes takes much longer than the initial observers, the initial people who are chronicling this stuff. It oftentimes takes a lot longer for the general public to finally wake up and to realize, what has happened. I mean, it might take 10 years, it might take 30 years, or it might take a few hundred years. But I hope that even if I'm not around to see the full truth elucidated and generally recognized, I mean, I hope it will eventually happen. But I won't linger on this too long. But the documentary evidence of Fauci's criminal malfeasance, it's pretty thick. Today I gave a talk to some people with this Maha group, and I'll repeat what I told them. I would like to draw attention to a particular paper that was published in 2022 by a prominent virology journal called Frontiers in Virology. A group of molecular biologists and biostatisticians got together, and they thought this particular genetic sequence that is part of the genome of SARS-CoV-2, that's the virus that causes the COVID-19 syndrome. They marveled at this so-called furin cleavage site. It's the part of the spike protein that enables this virus to dock onto a human epithelial respiratory tract cell and to infect humans. And they were particularly interested in a 12 nucleotide sequence that just doesn't look like something that comes out of nature. We don't see this in beta coronaviruses. And they thought, this is such a marvelous genetic sequence, this 12 nucleotide sequence. Has anyone ever patented this? It might come as a surprise to your audience that genetic sequences that are made in a laboratory, because they're unnatural, pharmaceutical companies, researchers can actually patent them for research purposes. So they do what's called a blast search. They look at a genetic sequence database, and they get a perfect hit on a 19 nucleotide sequence that overlaps perfectly this 12 nucleotide sequence that was patented by Moderna, the messenger RNA vaccine manufacturer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in 2016. So how did this key component of the SARS-CoV-2 genome, why was it patented by Moderna in 2016? And literally no one has even tried to answer this question. Strangely enough, Maria Bartiromo at Fox Business, she asked the CEO of Moderna, Stefan Bancel, Stefan, how do you explain this? And he said, well, I'll have my scientists look into it. But there was no follow-up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's smoking gun physical evidence, but somehow Congress and the president, and just no one kind of quite seems to see it. Why is that?
Well, because what you have described is the absolute and total evidence that this is a bioweapon that was created by man, that was weaponized and released on the world. And the people who profited most from it, are the very ones who created it. And it was financed by the American government. So the evidence is there. So whether we discover this and the evidence is so overwhelming that they cannot discount me and you or censor us the way we've been censored or write us off to where the future will say this Fauci, the American government, in conjunction with corrupt corporatists who have pharmaceutical companies and who trace back to the idea that they've always wanted, which was population control. I mean, since the dawn of this all, these are all people who believe in eugenics. They think the problem is population. And they've released a weapon, and they are the greatest mass murderers since Mao Zedong. That's undeniable. And all we need is the rest of everybody to catch up. And you've been working on this diligently. And this, what you've just said, is evidence you cannot discount. It cannot be discounted. And that's called the Chicago Shuffle, by the way. Oh, yeah, we created that long ago. I'll get back to you. My people will check on it. We'll get right back to you. That's how it works. And it buys off the morons, right? Because this is the other thing that I'm assuming is the basis of your book, Mind Virus. The problem with people is they can adapt lower, and they can adapt a lower standard of living. They can adapt lower information and to a lower IQ far easier than they can demand a higher standard, can't they?
Well, I'm glad that you brought it back to my general theme. A mind virus, it's a sort of a metaphor for an irrational idea that just doesn't stand up to even elementary common sense, that in an atmosphere of fear and propaganda will not only be embraced by otherwise reasonable adults, but actually spread like a sort of contagion. Humans are very imitative or hypersocial. We, in order to ascertain what's going on in the world, we tend to look at what other people are thinking. And so we have this weird phenomenon in which a stark raving lunatic idea will start to circulate and gain currency. And then you get a critical mass of people who believe it. And then at that point, it's very hard to undo the brainwashing. And these things can, within a pressure atmosphere of fear of a sort of a boogeyman. It could be terrorism. It could be climate change. It could be racism. It could be COVID-19. I mean, we've just seen one boogeyman after another emerge over the last 25 years. And every time we're told, be terrified, that's component one. Everyone needs to just have the living daylight scared out of them. And then secondly, however, the central government and its cronies in various industries, can provide a countermeasure to defeat the boogeyman. it's just going to require hundreds of billions of dollars of public money, of federal money, in order to do it. So we have this enormous transfer of wealth from the public purse to whoever has apparently positioned himself to vanquish the boogeyman, and we just go along with it. And, you've probably noticed this, like the moment that a fairly large number of people start to wise up and realize that we've been hoodwinked, well, we don't really have time to discuss it because yet another crisis is upon us. So I document this with the book, how we just go from one crisis to the next, all of which is happening within the context of runaway federal debt. Congress has thrown in the towel. Both parties have thrown in the towel on any kind of fiscal restraint. And so, a crisis now has become a good thing. Let's have something terrifying, and, we can just, at the stroke of a keyboard, create trillions of dollars and shovel it off into the accounts of whoever it is that's well-positioned to deal with this thing, or apparently so. So we just get one crisis after the next. Well, what my book does, it shows the connective tissue. It's always the same. The face changes, but the script remains the same.
That's why I loved, when I first really started to get into I was lucky enough to live through the Cold War. And I had a friend of mine who is a descendant of Cubans. And you start to learn as a kid about this ideology that casts people into servitude. And why would anybody give up their own freedom? And fear, obligation, and guilt are the tenets of Karl Marx, right, in the Communist Manifesto. But if you really go back, Machiavelli used the same thing. You could go back to the Vatican. You go back to religion. It's amazing how you can manipulate people if they're afraid, how much they'll give up, not just their own common sense, but their own freedom, their own liberty, and how we've passed the major tenets to backdoor nationalize our lives in America. They've been doing this to us since early 20th century. And that's where they've perfected it. And Barack Obama and this modern Chicago mafia Democrats, they perfected it because it's buckshot now. And that's what you're describing. Buckshot. It's one to the next, to the next, to the next. And you got to do this and you got to do that. And before you know it, these imbeciles who never worked a day in their life are telling people who own businesses what to pay the people who work for them. That's how it works, right?
Well, it's true, and it's true that the Democrats are always serving us up the most just totally insane, retarded stuff. Yeah. But I don't really see evidence that the Republicans are doing much to put the brakes on it. When it comes to these big things, whether it be biopharmaceutical stuff or this endless series of wars abroad or bailing out Wall Street or whatever it is, it seems to me that both parties, with the exception, I'm a big fan. Like I said, I like Ron Johnson and I like Thomas Massie and I like Rand Paul, but they're kind of the exception to the Republicans. I sometimes feel like we're given the impression of genuine, sincere, searching debate between these two parties. But, what is it about this big, powerful complex in Washington that he never seems to really be accountable? We have congressional hearings, the elections bounce back and forth, but business kind of seems to go on unabated. And there doesn't really seem to be, just to give you an example, so this gender bender stuff, this so-called epidemic of gender dysphoria. Well, for sure, Obamacare, by making insurance payments for so-called gender-affirming care, that ushered this in, that sort of midwife this madness in. But, it wasn't until Ken Paxton in Texas and a couple of brave AGs on the state level that anything was done about it. It's madness.
It's money.
Go ahead.
It's money. This is the thing that
right.
People, people lose sight of it, but to me it's something that really you need to have the perspective of. The idea that this country, $30 trillion in 18 years, it took 236 years to get to $9 trillion, just under. And
I'm
in
glad that you point this out. This is one of those facts that I really linger on in the book. It's just astonishing.
Well, the difference between a Republican and a Democrat in Illinois is how much it takes to bribe them. Money. It's money. And we open the door. Who opens the doors for unlimited money? Look at these scoundrels that never worked a day in their fracking life. They never pay taxes on the coffer. It's all legitimate. They've legitimized political bribery. And this notion that we just funnel into it, this is why I'm telling you the cold Civil War gets hotter every day. But ultimately, I believe in the principles of what this country is. And I believe that people can secede peacefully if motivated properly. And that's what the good people have to do. We are the majority in this country. And when I say we, people who know right from wrong, that's what Trump really represents. And I came to like him. I did not like him for his collusion and cooperation for years with the mafia, with Democrat mafia, for right there in Chicago, New York, California, pick it. But what he did is I underestimated his love and patriotism for what the principles of the country are. That's who support Donald Trump. The Republicans are the Bush Republicans. They just want in on the scam. How did that sissy old man Bush become an oil man? You really think that the CIA didn't hand them the oil fields after they seized it from some sucker and made all the contracts? This all leads back to power and money, and there's never been more of it floating around. And look at what COVID did. You bailed out all of these Democrat dungholes that were bankrupt. You splashed the pot with trillions that they're just starting to figure out. And it's all because of what you titled your book, not the other one about So it's true. In terms of partisan politics, I try to frame this within the context of a much bigger historic sweep. You referred to the church, the Reformation, and the Counter-Reformation. This metaphor of mind viruses, it actually has the lineage. I go back to the writings of a Swiss psychiatrist named Carl Jung, who wrote about what he called psychic epidemics. That is basically the same definition, a deeply irrational, destructive, ruinous idea that seems to catch on like a contagion. He was actually thinking, amongst other things, of these dreadful witch trials in 16th century Switzerland, where like every single woman in a village who had not borne children would be burned as being a witch. And, he asked, how did this idea that we need to burn all of our women, how did that catch on where deacons of colleges and magistrates and judges and, you name it, are actually going along with this madness. Mind virus.
And so or he called it a psychic epidemic. I'm using the modern American parlance of a mind virus. How does this possibly come about? And Jung and other analysts, identified fear and stress. This you put human beings in a state of stress, anxiety, fear, and we kind of revert back to a sort of archaic, prehistoric, small tribal being that is constantly threatened by the natural environment. The thing that we modern people need to recognize is, we're not on the veldt. We're not in a cave with saber-toothed tigers or whatever trying to kill us. We actually have multiple layers of security.
Yes.
Starting with food security. And, so every time the government comes along and says we need to be terrified, I show in the book, take a big step back and take a deep breath. You're probably being lied to.
The name of the book is Mind Viruses. John Leake. You know what else wasn't in those caves? Transvestites. I can't thank you enough for making time for me. I'm up against the clock. I could talk to you for an hour. I so appreciate it. I cannot wait to get the book Mind Viruses. Where's the best place to get it?
Amazon. Everybody, get this book. It will immunize your minds against the next mind virus unleashed. And believe me, it's coming. Buy it on Amazon.
You're talking to the right audience, John Leake. Thank you so much for always making time. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaun. I always love it. Talk to you later.
All right. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Call Shaun now. 312-642-5600.
Welcome back to Ask Hasselus